All right, good morning, all. So this week we're going to be doing two portions. Last week's portion that we missed because I was out of town, Bo and Beshalach, and they are connected. Not coincidentally, Parshas Bo, that's why you're getting two sets of Parsha facts, because one for last week's portion, Bo, and one for this week's Parsha Beshalach. So Bo is found, chapter 10, verse 1, found on page 340 in your handy art scroll, has actually 20 commandments, many related to the Passover. 9 positive, 11 negative. Of the 613 commandments, it's mitzvah 4 through 23. Thank you. And the list of commandments can be found on the second page if you're interested to think about it. Okay, so interesting, the word Bo is Beis Aleph. Beis is 2 and Aleph is 1. Together that's 3. So that's 3 is the third, it's the third portion in Chumash Shemot, the book of Exodus, and also 3, it has the last 3 plagues of the 10 plagues. Okay. So it starts off saying, Bo el Paro, come to Paro. Question is, why does it say come to Paro? Why is God saying to Moshe, come to Paro? Why doesn't he say go to Paro? And it does have other times where it says go. And one answer is God is everywhere. So come along with me. You know, if I tell you go somewhere, it indicates that I'm here and you're to go somewhere else. But here it's reminding us that God is all over, and God is saying, come with me, because God is really everywhere. And again, one of the reasons that's happening here is the Torah tells us that God wants us to pass this on, this information, pass it on to future generations. There's a very interesting thing that someone figured out. How long is a generation? Anyone have a number?
About 20 years.
What?
Like 25.
25, around 25 years. So if you think about it, most Siddharim, the Passover Seder, which celebrates coming out of Egypt, have usually, all things being possible, 3 generations, right? Because there's the grandfather, the father, and the child, right? So in my particular case, unfortunately, my grandparents were killed out during the Holocaust, so we didn't have the 3 generations. But when I have a Seder, so I grew up with my father's thing. Now I'm the father and the grandfather, and God willing, will continue that. And what they figured out is that if you make a generation 30 instead of 25, you can do the math and figure it out at 25. It's just a drop more. But the idea is that you can go back to the Seder that was had. It's only 16 generations, which, like, you think it's thousands of years, you know, who knows what happened. But no, it's only 16 generations, because again, it's grandfather, father, son or daughter, then it's father, son, and then grandson or granddaughter, and it's only so that's not really not that much if you think about it that way. Just that was something very interesting, and we do pass it on. The idea of the Pesach Seder is to pass it on to the next generation. Yes.
Am I understanding correctly? You're saying that we're only 16 generations away from the Exodus?
It's not 16 generations, but it's 16 sets of Siddharim that have the different people in it. Because grandfather, son, or let me do it the other way, starting off as a grandson, then a father, then a grandfather. There's 16 or 20 sets, if you will, depending on how you count the generation.
Between now and
Going back to Exodus, right? Because again, it's you go through lifetimes and different people are different roles in the Seder process. They're either a child or they're a father or mother or grandfather or grandmother. And that there's only 16 sets of that, if 20 sets of that, if you depending on how you count a generation. So that just was I just thought it was very interesting. So Pharaoh wants to know who's going to go serve God. And Moshe says everybody's going to serve God, which Pharaoh is not a happy camper. He said, let the men, they're the ones that go, they're doing the service. And Moshe says, no, everybody has a role in Judaism. The children, the adults, the males, the females, may not be the same role, but everyone has a role. And Paris says, of course, no way. Rabbi
Czapnik,
Yes.
I remember you mentioned this in the past about the 16 generations, and I just did the math, like I did 90 for 3 generations times 16, which equals 1,440. So if you subtract 5,785 minus 1,440, you're not in 2,448.
So I don't know what you did. I don't know the math you did, but I'd have to figure it out again.
You said if you do each generation is 30 years, and there's approximately 3 generations that each say there, that's 90 years, right? So if you multiply that by 16 Siddharim, or yes, then that's 1,440. Subtract that from 5,785, our current year. You're not in 2,448. Yeah.
Hold, give me a second. If you're going through the, let me
Not to contradict you, just I was curious.
No.
Yeah.
Let me. It's fine. If I'm wrong, you can contradict me. No problem. But so what he's saying here is, because I'll tell you what he says. It's because each generation is really not just that generation, because it's here, let me read it to you as the writer put it here. And a typical Pesach Seder, there could be at least 3 generations at the table: a grandfather, a father, and a son. Similarly, obviously, grandmother, mother, and daughter. Let's say the average gap between generations is 30 years. So a typical Seder represents a span of 60 years of Jewish history. 30 years between the grandfather and the father, and further 30 years between the father and the son. However, the grandfather sitting at our table was a grandson at his grandfather's table. And similarly, our grandson will be a grandfather, God willing, at his grandson's Seder. So really, there aren't 3 generations represented at the table, but 7. You get it?
Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay.
So a
Yeah.
Seder could span as much as 7 times 30, which is 210 years. If you divide 210 years into the time elapsed since this first Seder, approximately 3,300 years ago, you come up with an amazing number. 3,300 divided by 210 is 15.714285. So it's like 16 Siddharim, again, if you're using the 30 years as a generation. You get it?
Yeah, of course. You can just do, instead of you do 30 times 7, and then you subtract that number from 5,785, you should be approximately 2,448.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So we've been influenced by the past, and that influence is there at the Seder table with us, and we're also influencing
the future. That's the idea, because that's what the Torah says. We're supposed to we're passing it on from generation to generation. But again, the trick is keeping it traditional, keeping it the way it was. That's not so simple. I shouldn't waste time with this, but I'll do it anyway because it eats at me. There's a discussion: should there be female rabbis? Okay, so a woman asked, yeah, go ahead.
Nothing I said when I was younger, I wanted to be like.
Yes, okay. And that's a longer discussion, which we're not going to have now. But what had happened was someone once asked an Orthodox rabbi, should there be female rabbis? So the rabbi answered flippantly. He said, a female rabbi is as appropriate as an orange on the Seder plate. Meaning to say that doesn't fit. Again, doesn't answer the question, and that's for a longer discussion, which I'm happy to have another time. But so at that moment, it became very common in the Reform movement to put an orange on the Seder plate to counteract that the whimsical line that he did. Now, you're muted, Chani, but so what's the problem with that?
My reaction is that's a little crazy.
Yeah,
Like giving credence to something
crazy?
not normal.
Why is it crazy? Because there's a tradition that is tied to the customs that have been going on for generations and generations. And because one rabbi said a line, doesn't mean you change the Seder because of it. So I'm just saying, the idea is to keep the connection going all the way back, which we're going to see how important that is in a little bit. But let's interesting. Paris says this is not a good thing for you. Don't go, because his astrologer said he sees blood in the Jewish people go into the desert. There's blood there, and in fact, the astrologers were right, but the blood was the blood of circumcision. So the Jewish people have an ability to transcend transcend nature and transcend the zodiac signs. So we have the ability to do that. So the eighth plague is Arba grasshoppers, and they ate whatever is left. Yes.
Does this have to do with the grasshoppers with the idea? They say they look like grass.
No, not you jumping ahead to a story later on. No, this is not that. Now one thing that we have to talk about is that God was hardening Pharaoh's heart. So what does that mean? What does it sound like it means?
Making him more like harsh,
Harsh, okay. And what else?
Close-minded.
Close-minded. So did he have free choice? That's an interesting question. Different opinions about that. Some opinions say that in fact he had no free choice, because at this point he had paved the path for himself of not listening to God. He had all these 5 plagues and nothing impressed and nothing moved him. Okay, now you're stuck in the pattern that you've paved for yourself. That's one interpretation of the hardening of the heart, that God wanted to finish the process of the 10 plagues and didn't give him a choice. But another interpretation is in fact the opposite, which is that God wanted him to have free choice to be able to choose. Now, if I take out a gun and say, I want you to give me $1,000 out of your own free will, are you going to give me the $1,000 if I have the gun? No.
If you care about your life.
If you care about your life, are you going to give me the $1,000? No. Okay, Murray doesn't want to. But other people might consider it, right? Now, are you giving it out of free will? No, that's not free will. You can say it's free will, but it's not free will. So God hardened his heart to say, after all the miracles you saw, I'm going to shift you back to a place of free will that you can decide. I'm going to harden your heart not to be influenced by the by the plague, so that you have free choice. Now, just as an aside, the other interpretation is that a person does something wrong. A sin committed the first time, you have regret. The second time, it's probably really okay. The third time, you think that sin is a mitzvah. It's really the right thing to do. Justification. We justify our behavior. And that's a problem. So that's partially what another interpretation of Pharaoh's heart being hardened, that he was hardening his own heart because he justifies his actions and says, "Oh no, I'm right. I'm really right. I'm really right." So either way, God was going to have the plagues. So the eighth one was the grasshoppers. And this is, by the way, just distinct for Pharaoh, is a very important idea for us. Are we stuck in the past? Are we stuck in the patterns and habits and what we've always been doing, or are we willing to change? And that's a tough one, because we all are creatures of habit, and what's convenient and what's easy and what I know and what I've been doing or how I was raised or what my friends and family expect me to do, that's not easy to change. But we need to think about that, really, if we want to grow as people. How can I do the right thing regardless of the external pressures that are around me? And that's something that takes, yes, support, and hopefully one has a community, a rabbi, somebody who can guide them. What's my first step? What's my second step? What's my third step? But more importantly, the willingness. I don't know how to ice skate or how to roller skate. I used to try. Okay, and I was pretty good as long as I was holding on to the railing on the side. But when I got to the end of the railing and I had to go to the next wall and there was a gap and no railing, right? That's the daring part. That's something we need to learn from, to be able to take the plunge. Okay, the ninth Makkah was Makas Choshech, the plague of darkness. But before I get to it, I do want to point out some nice lines that someone had written. What is proof of man's intelligence? It's his freedom of choice. It's not how much you can memorize math and how fast you can do math problems. The freedom of choice. Says the Talmud Yitzchak, when there is no free will, there's no good and evil impulses. Because if we're all pre-programmed, then there's no good evil, there's no good impulse, there's no negative evil. I'm just pre-programmed. This is the way I have to be. And the Medrash, the oral tradition, says the wicked are ruled by their heart, and the righteous rule their heart. So who's running the show? Is it the heart running the show, or are we reining it in? So then we have the plague of darkness, which, number one, they didn't steal. The Egyptians had the darkness, the Jews did not. Now, why didn't the Jews escape during the plague of darkness? They could have escaped. Could have left. The Egyptians couldn't see them. They could, and especially the last 3 days of the plague, the Egyptians were stuck. They couldn't even move. And the answer is because God didn't want them to escape. He wanted them to be free, sent out as free people. Now, as we're going to find out, some of the Jews died during the plague of darkness. Why? Because they didn't want to leave. And God said, you're not leaving? Then you're stuck. in a very dark place called Egypt, and you're not realizing you have a different role, you have a different job. And that's, again, a powerful question for us. Where are we at? Imagine the Messiah comes, hopefully soon in our days, and he says, okay, pack up your bags, time to go to the land of Israel. What about my job? What about my apartment? What about my dog? What about my car? What about my this, my that, the other? And that's, again, I'm not going to ask people their thoughts on it, but think about it. It's something to contemplate, you know. It's not easy to make those changes, but that's what was happening in Egypt. And now that things were being relieved a little bit, the Jews were being relieved a little bit of the pressure, because the plagues were keeping the Egyptians pretty busy. You know what? It's pretty comfortable here. And I think, again, as I say, Jaylee's very non-profit. I'm not a prophet, but I think the events after October 7th in the United States are here to wake us up to say, hey, you know what? You know, it's very comfortable, nice, you know, you can have a sign on a building, Jewish Learning Exchange, and generally, it usually is not the face. We've had some little things with nothing dramatic. And you can have classes and people can come in, it's wonderful, and you can buy kosher food publicly, it's not, you know. But we have to remember, America is not the homeland that we envision for ourselves. And it's not so comfortable all the time. Just the fact that people would throw down a picture where it says kidnapped, which was true. There was nothing, you may think the Arabs are right, and rip down the pictures, like, why? What's the point of that? Like, what are you trying to say? You're justifying October 7th? So, you know, and what's going on in college campuses and the anti-Semitism in general, you know, interesting. When more hostages were being released, there was an increase in anti-Semitism online, which is like, so odd. But in any event, the Jews did not steal any of the money. They just looked at what they had. And Pharaoh was very upset about this. And he said, you're not going to come here anymore, Moshe and Aaron. And Moshe and Aaron said, you're right, because of what's going to happen in the end. They didn't tell him that he's going to come looking for them. It was told that there's going to be one more plague, and you should ask the Egyptians for things, and the Egyptians are suddenly going to be gracious and start giving them gifts. Now, the Dubno Maggid has a wonderful parable about it, to explain what were these gifts that the Jewish people were promised to Avram. Hashem said they're going to go out with great wealth. Now, the real gift was the Torah. So, but the Dubno Maggid gives an example. He says a guy a wealthy man hired a worker, and he said, I'm going to give you a bag of silver coins for all the work that you've done. And the man was so happy with the work that he did that he gave him a big check, much larger than the amount of silver coins in the bag. And the man was, oh, shucks, I expected a bag of silver coins. He gave me a piece of paper, you know, oh. So the man's father goes to the rich guy and says, look, I know you were very gracious. You gave him a lot more than you promised, but he doesn't know what a check is. Give him some silver coins just to make him happy as well. No problem. So God was giving us this gift called the Torah, but we didn't know what it was. Hashem said, you know, I'm going to give them some gold and silver as well, till they figure out and appreciate that what the Torah is. So at midnight is when the plague would begin, where the first one of the Egyptians would die. And God also said that the month of Nisan, the first month where Passover is in, would be the first month of the year. And actually, in biblical times and later in Israel, it was determined by witnesses seeing the new moon and coming to the court, and the court would declare the beginning of the new month. It was initially done, we didn't have a calendar per se, we had it done by the court in Israel. And the people had to prepare for the Paschal lamb. They had to take the animal into their home, 4 days before. Now, why was that? Because the Egyptians served, there was an idol of theirs, the sheep. And now the Jews are taking into their home. Are they brave enough to do the right thing, even though the Egyptians say, hey, what are you doing with that? Says, oh, we're going to bring our Paschal lamb with this. What? But they did, and they tied it to their bedposts. And on the 14th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, they would ritually slaughter it and place the blood on the doorposts and on the top of the door, so that God would pass over the Jewish homes. That's where the name of the holiday comes from, because the Jews were willing to make the commitment to do it. It was roasted, not cooked or raw, and eaten with matzah and maror. Sound familiar? Matzah and maror, like the Pesach Seder. What?
They washed.
No, they didn't have it raw. They roasted it.
Excuse me.
You're excused.
Thank you. Doesn't in the Parsha, doesn't Hashem specify that there's other methods of cooking that you're not permitted to use? Don't boil it.
Right, roasted.
Why is roasting so important?
Roasted is one piece, and it should be intact, if you will. There's other things to that, but on one level, that's and this was the Pesach Seder, the first of many Pesach Seders, and this is very, very important. I'm going to share a terrible story, which I think it can inspire us at the same time. There was a terrorist in an Israeli jail, and he saw that his Israeli guard was eating pita bread on Passover. And this terrorist was very depressed, because he said, we can't defeat the Israelis. They're more powerful than we are, and we're not going to beat them. But then he saw the Israeli guard eating the pita bread, and he said, hey, isn't this your holiday of Passover? You're not supposed to be having bread? And the guard said, I'm not religious, I don't really care about this stuff. And the terrorist had an epiphany. He said, if they're not connected to their tradition, we can beat them. And when this terrorist was let out, because one of those lopsided trades, which unfortunately they're still doing now, which is, I'm glad they're not asking me whether it's a good idea or not a good idea. It's very, 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 very challenging decision. Do you let out, to save 4 Jews, do you let out 100 terrorists? And by the way, the newspapers don't call them terrorists, they're prisoners. Most of these people have blood on their hands. Some of them had life sentences, but that's another issue. But be that as it may, he came back and he said, we can defeat them because they're not connected to their tradition. If they're not connected to their tradition, then we'll beat them. And as a matter of fact, on October 7th, some of the terrorists asked the people they captured, what do you believe in? What's your belief system? And a lot of them didn't know. What do you mean? One side, well, there's the Rambam, Maimonides has 13 attributes of belief, and I know a few of them, and they would mock them and say, "You don't know your own belief system. You don't know what that is." And that's, again, like I said, it's a terrible story, but it's a powerful one for us to realize the importance of being connected to our tradition, our past, and to become knowledgeable and learn. And that's why JLE and many other wonderful organizations are around, to try to be able to pass that on. And the Shabbos before Pesach is called Shabbos Hagadol, the big Shabbos. And the reason why it's called the big Shabbos is because that in Egypt was 4 days before, and that's when they took the animals into their home, and the Jews were not attacked, even though they were taking their deity and preparing to ritually slaughter it. There's a verse in the Torah that says in Parshas Bo, no chametz. What does no chametz mean? No leavened bread. And ushmartem es hamatzos, you should watch the matzos. What do you have to watch them for? Get a camera and watch it.
They don't become chametz.
It doesn't become chametz. You make sure it doesn't rise. You know, you have to work it with it fast and bake it right away, right? So our sages learn it's a play on words. Ushmatem es hamitzvos. It's actually spelled the same way, just depending on the voweling. You should watch the mitzvahs. What does that mean? So mitzvah haba liyadcha, a mitzvah that comes to your hand, al tach mitzena. Don't let it become chametz. Don't let it become leaven. What does that mean? No, it means don't do it fast. Don't say, oh, this opportunity came to me. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it later. No, mitzvah comes to your hand like chametz. Don't let it rise. Do it. Take care of it right now. When it's in your hand, do it right away. And that's a very nice idea.
Enthusiasm.
It's not only enthusiasm. You're right. That's part of it. Not only having an enthusiasm, but it also means doing it with alacrity, not waiting. Take the opportunity now, because tomorrow has another opportunities. First of all, A, this opportunity may not still be here, and B, it could be another opportunity. By the way, just as a side thing, chametz, that means bread that's leavened, represents boastfulness, and matzah represents humility. Okay, so that's an important idea related to Pesach as well. So the last plague takes place, and Paro comes running to find them and say, "Hey, Moshe, you can go." Moshe says, "I'm sorry." And by the way, there's a famous kid song that you should just be aware of. Paro in pajamas in the middle of the night. Paro in pajamas in the middle of the night, because he came looking for them in the middle of the night, because he was the firstborn also, and he didn't want to. He was afraid he was going to die too, but it might have kept him alive so he could be a witness to what everything has taken place. But in any event, Moshe says, "Sorry, we have to wait till morning because we're not sneaking out in the middle of the night. To wait till morning, and the Jewish people leave with dough. They wanted to make bread. There wasn't time, so they had matzah instead, and they had faith that the Almighty would provide for them. And they were able to get out of Egypt earlier, even though supposedly they were supposed to be there for 400 years, but the intensity of the servitude was so intense that it was concentrated in 270 years. And the Parsha concludes with commandments that we remember the going out of Egypt. We say it in the Shema, and we say it in and again the Seder, as many of the customs that we have here are related to that. That was last week's Parsha. So now Beshalach, which is found in your handy article Chumash on page 366, has only one commandment in it. And the Jewish people leave Egypt. And by the way, this Shabbos has a special name. It's called Shabbos Shira. And you know what a Shira is? Song, very good. It's Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos of song, because in this week's Parsha is the Jewish people sang the song by the sea. After the miracles of the splitting of the sea, which we're going to talk about in a few moments, the miracles of the sea, they sang a beautiful prophetic song, and that's why the Shabbos has a special name called Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos of song. So God did not take them the usual way. He took them a longer way to avoid their regretting leaving Egypt, because if the Philistines, the Plishtim, would fight with them, they would say, "Oh my gosh, we left Israel and now we're being attacked." Oh, and this is an important lesson for us. When we make the right choice, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy street. I repeat that. When we make the right choice, it doesn't always mean it's going to be easy street. And God's teaching that lesson to us because sometimes you make the right choice and things get challenging sometimes still. It doesn't mean, oh, I made the right choice. Doesn't God owe me? No, God doesn't owe us anything. We're doing the right thing and we have to just persevere and keep on taking the path, the right path. Now, that's why, by the way, it's very important to have some guidance about growth, how to grow, because sometimes people want to jump and grow very fast, and that's, you know, when you jump on a ladder, you can fall down easily, and that's why a person needs a mentor to say, what's the next step? What's the next step? Well, not too much, not too fast, not too slow, because again, we can be complacent and not grow. I saw a sign in front of a store the other day, which is very much a Jewish concept, a Chinese proverb. Don't be afraid of going slowly, be afraid of standing still. And this is really a Jewish idea, really, that to grow slowly and methodically, and again, getting guidance about how to do that is the right way to do it. Now, Yosef said something to the Jewish people before he died. And remember what it was? We talked about it. He asked that his bones be removed from the land of Egypt. He didn't want to stay there. The Egyptians wanted him to stay, so they put him in a heavy box and dumped him into the Nile River so that he should bring blessing to the country and not be able to leave. So when everyone was getting their things, the Egyptians were graciously giving them gold and silver. Moshe went to the Nile and miraculously got the coffin to come up and took the bones of Yosef out of Egypt with him. And this is looked upon as Moshe. He was smart. He's grabbing a mitzvah. Now, what do you mean? They were also doing a mitzvah. They were told to get stuff from the gold and silver from the Egyptians. Wasn't that a mitzvah too? But this was a bigger mitzvah. Why? Why was getting the bones of Yosef a bigger mitzvah? Jeopardy music is appropriate now. Go ahead. Excellent. You're not getting anything out of it, right? Also, I was a life saver instructor. I was a water safety instructor. And one of the things that they taught us was when you're at a scene and somebody needs medical care, don't say, call an ambulance. You know why? Because everybody's relying on everybody else to call the ambulance. You point to a person and say, you call an ambulance. This way it's that person's responsibility. So Yosef's bones are being taken. What do I have to do it for? I'm busy, getting the gold and silver. Moshe said, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to go do it. So that's an important idea for us to know. Don't rely on other people. Opportunity comes up, we should do it ourselves. So Moshe grabbed the bigger mitzvah. Now, when the Jewish people were traveling, they had a divine cloud that was leading them. By day was a divine cloud, at night was a fire cloud. This is a wonderful, the first GPS, God positioning system, okay? And I wrote in my notes here, Mildred, I wrote it in my notes here. Mildred Grid says, follow the cloud, not the crowd.
Yes,
Remember that line?
I certainly do. Yes.
Okay,
Thank
it's
you
in my notes here.
for remembering it.
What?
Thank you for remembering it.
I didn't remember, but I saw it in my notes. I wrote it in my notes. That's it. Follow the cloud, not the crowd. It's very
Mildred, I remember it.
You
Yeah,
remember?
I didn't want to
Yeah.
say anything, but the rabbi
Okay, I
did
remember.
mention
Yeah.
it last year when we did
Yep.
this podcast as well. Yes.
And
Yes.
hopefully we'll hear it again next year, God willing.
God willing. The problem is my brain capacity is limited. I need to get more memory, you know what I'm saying? So-
No, no, it's
No.
not. You're just not accessing it. We use what, 10% of our brain or less?
Okay, fine. Thanks a lot, Connie. I appreciate that.
No, meaning you got plenty of potential.
It's
Don't
okay.
worry.
It's all right.
It's the perspective, how we see something, right?
Yes, but in any event, the Egyptians were wondering, hey, and God tells the Jewish people to stay in the desert by one of the idols of the Egyptians, and to fool the Egyptians into thinking that they're stuck in the desert, they can't get out, they don't know where they're going. And the Egyptians all of a sudden, even after everything, they say, what do we do? How do we let them go? What's going on here? So Moshe says, don't worry, God's going to take over. You're going to be okay. And they don't know what to do. Should they? Some of the Jews were upset. Which I forget it. We'll go back to Egypt. Some of the Jews said, we'll commit suicide. Other groups said, we'll trust in God. We'll fight the Egyptians. And some wanted to cry out in prayer. Everyone had different reactions. And Moshe answered all of them and say, don't worry about it. Stand still, Hashem's salvation is here. You can don't worry about the Egyptians, you're not going to see them anymore. And you don't have to fight, God will fight for you. And you don't even have to pray, just be silent. God's gonna lay it all out for you. And God says, go into the river, go into the sea. Now, the sea is the sea. There was no bridge, there's no boats. So Nachshon ben Aminadav was the first person who jumped in, and he just started walking in. And the water's coming higher, higher, higher. And God said to go, I'm going. And this is a powerful lesson of faith. And the sea split. And why did the sea split? In the merit of Yosef. Yosef, what did he have to do with it? His bones were there. But what did Yosef do in his lifetime? He resisted the temptation of the wife of Potiphar. Not an easy thing. So he went against nature. He was a young man, and this woman was attempting to seduce him very actively every single day, and he resisted her. So by going against nature, in the merit of his going against nature, so God went against nature and allowed the sea to split. And there were many miracles that they had. There was a path for each tribe, and they could still see each other. They could drink water from the walls. The land beneath them became hard, smooth, and dry, even though it was muddy, right? And they were able to cross very, very easily through it. And the Egyptians, surprisingly, gave chase. Also, by the way, remember we said that, I don't know if you remember, I mention this, but all the plagues were generally 1 week. The plague of darkness was only 6 days, 3 of where they couldn't see and 3 where they couldn't move. That extra the 7th day was kept there when the Egyptians got close to the Jewish people. God put the fire cloud on the side of the Jewish people, and the Egyptians had the darkness again that they couldn't see. They were trying to shoot arrows, but God's cloud was in between and caught the arrows, and some of them bounced back to the Egyptians.
Is this before the splitting of the sea?
This was before and at the splitting. And then God moves the clouds out of the way, and he said, let's follow them. The sea is open. We won't let them get away. So the Egyptians get stuck and in the mud, and the Egyptians are punished measure for measure. They took the Jewish babies and threw them into the water, and now they are being punished with the water. And the Egyptians drown there, and the Jewish people sing the song by the sea, and the first words are Az Yashir, then they will sing. And the question is, why is it not in the past tense? And the answer is because it's also related to a future time when we're going to sing, when there's going to be the resurrection of the dead, when the worthy souls are going to be will come back again. The
Rabbi Czapnik?
reincarnation will take place in the future. Yes.
Am I wrong? I'm remembering that they actually did a U-turn. They went into the sea and then they made a U-turn and landed back on the same
There
place
is an
where they
opinion in the
came.
matters that they
Yeah.
did that. There is an opinion like that. Yes, there is an opinion like that.
Is that opinion?
That they just the technical thing that they went into the sea and they came back out on the same side. Now the layout of the song by the sea is different than a regular Torah reading, and the art scroll mimics it. And let me just show you the layout. Mimics how it's written actually in the Torah. And here you can see it looks like bricks like this. And in the Torah scroll, the scribe writes it this way. So it's written this way because again it's unique because it is a song. And there's some beautiful verses. There's a lot of commentary on it. And we say, Zeh Keli Vanveyu, this is my God, and we shall glorify him. So one interpretation there is that they were able to see God's presence by the splitting of the sea, and they were able to point, Zeh, this is our God. Another interpretation is beautifying our mitzvahs, have a nice menorah, have a nice sukkah, do nice things in honor of the mitzvahs. So technically you could light candles, take, 2 beer bottles and stick in 2 candles, and you can light your candles for Shabbos, but no, we want to have a nice one. Many people have a silver candelabra just to beautify the mitzvah. So we try to beautify the mitzvahs. Another interpretation is I will try to copy God, just like God is compassionate and merciful, so will I try to be like that. There was a great rabbi, I was close to his son who took over as the rabbi, Kapishitzer Rebbe, who finally bought a new hat, and a poor man came to his house and didn't have a hat. So the Kapishitzer Rebbe said, you don't have a hat, I'll give you a hat. And he gave him his new hat. So his kid said, why'd you give him the new hat for? Why'd you give him your old hat? He says, which hat am I going to wear in eternity? The hat that I gave him. So you want me for eternity to wear my old hat? I want to wear my new hat for eternity. Right? It's just very sweet. Again, he was not required to do that, but it's a very sweet story. Miriam took instruments and sang with the women, a song to Hashem as well. There's a verse here, Mi kamocha be'elam Hashem, who is like you among the powerful ones, God. And the first letters, Mi kamocha be'elam Hashem, spell out Maccabi. Okay, so many people think the Maccabees, because they were strong, and they had a hammer, Yehuda HaMaccabi. No. It's the verse, Mi kamocha be'elam Hashem. They always said, who is like you among the strongest, God? God, you're the strong one. You're it. So they had faith in God, and that's why the Maccabees in the Hanukkah story were called Maccabees, because that was their battle cry. This verse from the song by the sea, Mi kamocha be'elam Hashem, who's the first letters of who is among the strong ones, who is like you among the strong ones.
It's interesting, there's no song.
There's no song.
Like you'd think that at this point there would be a Jewish musician that would have come up with a song for those words.
Connie, go for it. Write the music down. Yes.
The plays are called Makos. Does that have?
I'm sorry, the place what?
The plays are called, I'm gonna mispronounce this.
Makos, yes.
Makos. Does that have anything to do with the word Maccabee?
No. Makkah is to hit. A Makkah is to hit. The Maccabee is Mi kamocha be'elam Hashem. It's the first letters of that verse in this week's portion. Another verse in the portion is in the song is Hashem Ish Milchama Hashem Shemo. God is the man of war, and God is his name. That the Yud Kei Vav Kei is the God of mercy. That God at the same time can do battle with the Egyptians and be merciful to the Jewish people. God actually, his essence is merciful. And actually we say in the Shema Yisrael, there is a Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem, God of judgment, Hashem Echad. Ultimately, he is the God of mercy, even if the judgment does take place in the middle. Important idea. The Jewish people were nervous about the Egyptians, but God made that the Egyptian body should spit up on the banks of it. By the way, you can actually go online and look at pictures of chariots that are in the Red Sea on the bottom, stuck in the ground. If they're the Egyptian ones or not, could be, I don't know, but you can look at it online.
They claim they see wheels.
Yes, I'm saying that you can look at that online. You can see the wheels from chariots on the bottom of the Red Sea. So, just if that excites you, go for it. The Jewish people came to a place called Mara, where the water was bitter. There's much to say, but I'm going to try to capsulize it. And there, in this week's portion, we learn out about that we shouldn't go 3 days without the study of Torah. Okay? And that's why we read the Torah during the week. Sunday you don't, but Monday you do. Tuesday, Wednesday you don't. Oh, Thursday you do. Friday you don't. Shabbos you do. So you never have 3 days without a Torah reading. Okay? So there was a man who lived here in town, a very special rabbi, Rabbi Simcha Wasserman, that's our blessed memory. There's a lot to say about him, but I'll say 2 stories about him. His father was a great dean of yeshiva in Europe and was killed in the Kovna ghetto with his students. Actually, he was in America and the people were saying, stay. He says, I'm not leaving my students. He went back. The Nazis came in and then he died sanctifying God's name. Before, as the winds of war were taking place, people asked him, should we go to America? And he said, he discouraged people. He said, the situation there for children is not good. You know, well, how are your kids going to grow up? It's a risk. I wouldn't recommend it. When his son, Reb Simcha, asked him, should he go to America? He said yes. And what did Reb Simcha say at that time to himself? I'm never going to have children. My father's letting me go. He would be consistent with me as well. And he and his wife never had children. And they moved to America. And he and his wife were a very special couple, very special couple. He was a rabbi. He was he started a yeshiva here, and he eventually moved to Israel. And then he came back for a few years to be in LA. And when he passed away, his wife said a beautiful thing. I didn't want to live another day without him. But I realized there's nobody to mourn for him because we have no children. So I'm glad that I'm still alive, that I could mourn for how special my husband was. After 7 days of mourning, she passed away. It's really a very powerful, amazing story. So Reb Simcha Wasserman said this interpretation. Why is the Torah just talking about us now, about not to go 3 days without Torah reading? And he said a very profound thought. He said, there's 2 ways of remembering you're Jewish. One is if the non-Jew is banging you over the head because you're a Jew. The other way is studying Torah and living a Torah life. Those are the 2 ways. You're banged over the head from the non-Jew, or you're trying to live a Torah life. The Egyptians were done with at the sea. 3 days went by. And that's when they were complaining about there wasn't water. And now is when they teach the law, don't go 3 days without a Torah reading, because the Egyptians are not banging them over the head. We need to have a Torah to keep us going. And I suggested to him, I had the honor and pleasure of meeting him and knowing him. He was not a Hasidic man. He was a Lithuanian ilk. And I said, Rabbi Wasserman, Rosh Hashiva, I'd like to share with you a Hasidic thought. I'd like to know if you agree. Want to hear? I said, in the Song by the Sea, it says, "V'hamayim lahem chaymam yiminam u'smoilam." The water was a wall on their right and the left when the sea split. The Torah is compared to water. So the water of Torah acts as a wall for us to realize the path we should go and how we should live life. And Rav Simcha Wasserman said, "Oh, I agree. I like that interpretation." So he gave me a stamp of approval of my addition to his thought. We're also introducing this week's parasha the story of the manna, the mun from heaven. The manna from heaven was amazing food. It could taste like whatever you wanted it to taste like. In California, you want it to taste like tofu. You want it to taste like salad. You want to taste like meat, whatever you want it to taste like, whatever you want. So it's an interesting question. What blessing did they make on it? So when I posed this question to my 5-year-olds, some of the kids came up with some cute ones. They said, you made the blessing of whatever food you were thinking about. All right. But actually, one of the commentaries made the blessing hamotzi lechem min hashemayim, when we drew bread from heaven, because it wasn't from the ground, because it fell from the heaven. And it fell, which is just cute, interesting, but it fell from heaven daily, with the exception of on Shabbos, it didn't fall. And Friday, there was a double portion, which is why on Shabbos we have 2 breads to remember the double portion, one for Friday and one for Shabbos, because God didn't want them to go find it on Shabbos. Everything you've prepared it before. Now, usually it's spoiled overnight, except for the Friday one, which was they able to use for Shabbos. And Dasan and Aviram, the troublemakers, they decided that they're going to show that Moshe was wrong. It did fall on Shabbos. Then he put some manna out on Friday, and they said, "Come, everybody, let's go look. Moshe's wrong. The manna did fall on Shabbos." And birds came and ate up the man before. So when Dasan and Aviram came to show off that the manna came, the man wasn't there because the birds had eaten it up. That's why there's a custom before Shabbos to put breadcrumbs out to thank the birds for saving Moshe's honor and eating up the mun.
I'm sorry for interrupting. So the breadcrumbs are put out before Shabbos because we're not supposed to.
Right.
While Shabbos, but on Shabbos Shirah, is that the Shabbos where people can feed the birds on Shabbos?
No, we do it before Shabbos. Generally do it before Shabbos. They saved a jar of it in the ark. Why? To realize that God is the ultimate provider of our livelihood, and to remember that. And
Does that go spoil?
no, it didn't. It was there for them to remember for eternity that Moshe would provide. Yes.
Why does it say that they should? Why is it not using the mind to test?
Because you have to have faith every day and not save anything for the next day. And to be okay. I don't know where the food's going to come. I don't know where my next sandwich is going to come. So every day is the manna is coming out. And why did God make it come every day? Because the king who gave his son a salary once a year, guess how many times he saw his son? once a year. But he give you it every day. Guess how many times he saw his son? Every day. So that's the idea. We should be cognizant of God's benevolence and graciousness in providing for us. The Jewish people were complaining, there's no water. And again, you can take the Jew out of Egypt. It's a little harder to take the Egyptian out of the Jew. So Moshe hit the rock, which was fine at that time, and water came out of it. The final thing in the parasha deals with the war with Amalek. Amalek was a wicked nation who were not threatened by the Jewish people, but they decided to fight against them. And this is the eternal battle between good and evil. There are those that say the Germans are descendants of Amalek. The killing babies in the Holocaust qualifies for that. But the war with Amalek, where Moshe prays and Yeshua fights and leads the Jewish people in battle to chase the Amalekis away. We have a commandment actually to remember the wickedness of Amalek. All right, so this is a lot about Parshas Bo and Parshas Beshalach. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next week, Saturday night, 8:15, Rabbi Marcus on mystical insights into the Hebrew letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Please join us. He's a great speaker. Questions, thoughts? Thank you, Margaret, for your good time from the many years ago. Appreciate it every year.
Oh, it was many good years. Thank you, Rabbi. Many good
Pleasure.
years.
Pleasure, Baruch Hashem.
Rabbi Czapnik, thank you. I gotta go. But,
I know you look freezing. I'm cold just looking at you.
yeah, it's very cold. I met some old.
I'm sorry.
I met some old good friends.
You're fading in and out. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's okay.
All right. Take care. All the best. Take care.
Rabbi,
Feel good. Yes.
Did
Take
you
care,
ever know
Elisheva.
a man who lived in the La Brea area?
I'm sorry?
Will. Did you ever know a man called Will Last? His last name was Last.
No,
Will or Bill
I'm bad at
Last.
names, but it doesn't sound familiar.
Oh, it's a shame because he did live in the your
In the hood.
area, and is that what it is? And his sister lives in my building. Lovely, lovely woman. So I was hoping that you had known him. I mean, he's up in the next world at this point, but
Okay.
I thought maybe.
I don't think so. I'm bad at names, but I don't think so. Doesn't sound familiar. All right. Feel good. Take care.
Shavua Tov.
Margaret, take care. Elisheva, take care. All the best.
Thanks, Rabbi. Thank you.